All right, so let's dive into something pretty amazing. It's like having our own personal biology lesson today. We're going to be looking at how animals transport everything they need to survive.
Fascinating stuff.
Yeah, and we're talking about, why you, me, all of us, not just like, weird sea creatures or anything.
Right, right. Those are pretty cool too. But yeah, today we're focusing on blood, hearts, and vessels, that whole circulatory system that keeps us going.
It's kind of mind-blowing when you think about it. Like, how did life even figure that out?
Well, if you start with the really simple organisms, the single-celled guys, they've got it easy. Just absorb nutrients right through their cell membrane.
Like just soaking it all up, huh?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
But obviously when you get to larger, more complex creatures like mammals, us, diffusion just isn't going to cut it. Too slow.
Right, like trying to deliver packages across a huge city using, I don't know, snails. Wouldn't work very well.
Not efficient at all. That's why we need a specialized circulatory system.
So it's basically a super efficient delivery service for the body.
Yeah.
Right? Bringing oxygen and glucose and all that good stuff to every single cell.
And let's not forget about taking away the waste products, too.
Oh, right. Got to take out the trash.
Yeah.
So it really is like a city, huh? With a whole network of roads and delivery trucks and everything.
Exactly. Making sure every part of the body gets what it needs and gets rid of what it doesn't.
But I'm guessing not all circulatory systems are created equal, right? Like different animals have different setups.
You got it. Take fish, for example. They have what we call a single circulatory system.
Single? Okay, so what's that like?
It's a single loop. Blood goes from the heart to the gills, picks up oxygen, and then continues on to the rest of the body before heading back to the heart.
So it only goes through the heart once on each trip.
Exactly. One-way street. But now, mammals were a bit more complex. We've evolved what we call a double circulatory system.
Double. Okay, so 2 trips through the heart. Why make things so complicated?
Well, that second trip is actually really important. It's what allows us to be so active. The first circuit, the pulmonary circulation, takes blood from the heart to the lungs to pick up oxygen. Then, that oxygen-rich blood comes back to the heart. Then it gets another big push from the heart, sending it out to the rest of the body. We call that the systemic circulation.
Ah, I see. So that second push gives the blood extra pressure.
Exactly. And that means oxygen can reach our tissues much faster. It's one of the reasons why mammals can be so much more active than, say, fish.
Makes sense. We're warm-blooded too, so that probably helps.
Absolutely. That combination allows us to do all sorts of things. Run, jump, think complex thoughts. It's a pretty awesome setup.
So single versus double. But are all circulatory systems basically the same apart from that?
Not at all. There's another big difference. Open versus closed systems.
Okay, what's that about?
Think of an open circulatory system like an irrigation system, where the water just flows freely through open channels.
Like kind of bathing the crops.
Yeah. Exactly. Insects, for example, they have this type of system. Their blood, called hemolymph, isn't confined to vessels. It just washes over the internal organs.
Sounds a bit messy.
It can be, and it's not as efficient for delivering oxygen, especially for bigger creatures.
So insects have a different way of breathing then?
Right. They have this separate system of tubes, called tracheae, that brings oxygen directly to their tissues.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
So closed systems, that's more like what we have, right?
Yep. Our blood stays neatly inside vessels, like a network of pipes.
So it's like a superhighway system.
Exactly. Closed systems are all about targeted delivery, making sure blood and therefore oxygen and nutrients reach every part of the body quickly and efficiently.
So that's why vertebrates with their closed systems can be so much more active, right?
Precisely. And that brings us to the heart of the matter, so to speak. The mammalian heart.
The engine of it all.
You could say that. And it's pretty amazing. It's a 4-chambered structure with the right and left atria and the right and left ventricles.
Okay, 4 chambers. That seems kind of complicated.
Think of it this way. The atria are like entryways where blood enters the heart. The right atrium gets the deoxygenated blood from the body, while the left atrium receives the oxygen-rich blood from the lungs.
And then what?
Then the ventricles take over. The right ventricle pumps the deoxygenated blood to the lungs, and the left ventricle pumps the oxygenated blood to the rest of the body.
Okay, so the ventricles are the real powerhouses then.
Definitely. And the left ventricle is actually more muscular than the right.
Why is that?
Workload. The left ventricle has the tougher job. It has to pump blood all the way around the body, while the right ventricle just sends blood to the nearby lungs.
Ah, I see. Makes sense.
It's like comparing a long-haul trucker to a local delivery driver. One definitely needs more muscle. And of course, we've got to make sure the blood flows in the right direction. That's where valves come in.
Valves. like in plumbing.
Exactly. They're like one-way doors in the heart, preventing any backflow and keeping things moving smoothly.
Smart design. So the heart's not just pumping randomly, right? There's a specific rhythm to it all.
Absolutely. It's called the cardiac cycle, a beautiful sequence of contraction and relaxation that makes up each heartbeat. It's like a perfectly timed dance.
Okay, break it down for me. What are the steps?
First, the atria contract, squeezing blood into the ventricles. Then the ventricles contract, and that's the powerful pump that sends blood either to the lungs or out to the rest of the body.
Okay, atria contract, ventricles contract, and then what?
Then comes a period of relaxation, allowing the heart to refill with blood before the next cycle begins.
Wow. And all that's happening without us even thinking about it.
Amazing, isn't it? But here's something even cooler. The heart can actually beat on its own without any signals from the nervous system.
Wait, really? So it has its own internal pacemaker?
You got it. It's a group of cells called the sinoatrial node, or SAN for short. It's located in the right atrium, and it generates electrical signals that spread through the heart, triggering those contractions.
So the SAN sets the pace for the heartbeat. But how do those signals get to the ventricles?
There's a relay system. The AV node, the atrioventricular node, picks up the signals from the SAN and then, with a slight delay, passes them on to the ventricles.
It's a delay. Why is that necessary?
Timing. That little pause makes sure the atria have finished contracting before the ventricles start. It keeps everything synchronized and efficient.
So it's like a perfectly choreographed relay race.
Exactly. And we can actually see this electrical activity with a tool called an electrocardiograph. It produces a record called an ECG, which doctors use to diagnose any heart problems.
Pretty amazing stuff. So we've got the heart pumping away, but what about the vessels themselves? They're like the transportation network, right?
Think of it as a complex system of highways and roads all working together to make sure blood gets everywhere it needs to go.
And there are different types of vessels, I'm guessing.
You bet. Arteries, for example, they're like the highways. Thick, muscular walls built to handle the high-pressure flow of blood coming from the heart.
So they're strong and stretchy.
Exactly. And they carry oxygen-rich blood away from the heart, except, of course, for the pulmonary arteries, which carry deoxygenated blood to the lungs.
Right, right. So what about the return trip?
That's where the veins come in. They're like the back roads carrying blood back to the heart.
And are they built differently than arteries?
They have thinner walls, and they actually rely on valves to prevent backflow, since the pressure isn't as high.
Smart. Makes sense. So walking and moving around helps with circulation then?
Exactly. It helps those muscles contract and push the blood along in the veins.
Okay, so we've got the arteries and the veins, but what about the actual exchange of oxygen and nutrients and all that? Where does that happen?
That happens in the capillaries. They're like the tiny side streets and alleys where all the deliveries and pickups take place.
So they're the smallest blood vessels.
The tiniest. And their walls are incredibly thin, just one cell thick, which allows for easy diffusion.
So it's like a microscopic marketplace with constant activity.
A perfect analogy. Now, here's a question for you. What happens to all the fluid that leaks out of the capillaries into the surrounding tissues?
That's a good question. It doesn't just stay there, does it?
Well, most of it gets reabsorbed back into the capillaries, but some of it becomes what we call lymph, and it enters a separate network of vessels, the lymphatic system.
Oh, right, the lymphatic system. That's part of the immune system, isn't it?
It is. It acts like a drainage system, collecting excess fluid and returning it to the bloodstream, but it also plays a crucial role in fighting off infections.
So it filters out bad stuff.
You got it. The lymph is filtered through lymph nodes, which are packed with immune cells ready to attack any pathogens they encounter.
Double duty. So we've talked about the heart, the vessels. What else is there?
Well, we can't forget about the star player inside red blood cells, hemoglobin.
Ah, hemoglobin. That's what makes blood red, right?
It does, but it's much more than just a pigment. Hemoglobin is a protein, and it has this amazing ability to bind to oxygen.
So it acts like a little transporter.
Exactly. Picks up oxygen in the lungs and delivers it to the tissues. Each hemoglobin molecule has 4 heme groups, and each heme group can bind to 1 oxygen molecule.
Wow, that's efficient. But how does it know when to pick up and release the oxygen?
It's all about partial pressure, basically the concentration of a gas in a mixture. The higher the partial pressure of oxygen, the more easily hemoglobin binds to it. And when the partial pressure is lower, hemoglobin releases the oxygen.
So it's like a supply and demand system.
Precisely. And we can see this relationship visually with something called a dissociation curve.
Dissociation curve. Sounds complicated.
Not really. It's just a graph that shows how much oxygen is bound to hemoglobin at different partial pressures. And the curve for human hemoglobin has this characteristic S shape.
Okay, and what's so special about the S shape?
It means hemoglobin is really good at both picking up oxygen in the lungs, where the partial pressure is high, and then releasing it in the tissues, where the partial pressure is lower.
Makes sense. So it's optimized for both loading and unloading.
Exactly. But there's another factor that affects how hemoglobin binds to oxygen carbon dioxide.
CO2? I thought that was just waste.
It is a waste product, but it also plays a role in regulating oxygen delivery. You see, when tissues respire, they produce CO2, and higher CO2 levels actually decrease hemoglobin's affinity for oxygen. We call this the Bohr effect.
So the more CO2, the more easily hemoglobin releases oxygen.
Exactly. It's like a built-in mechanism to make sure actively respiring tissues, which are producing more CO2, get a bigger supply of oxygen.
That's pretty cool. So it's like a feedback loop.
Precisely. Now, let's not forget about fetal hemoglobin. It's the specialized hemoglobin found in developing babies.
Right, because they get their oxygen from their mother's blood, right?
Exactly. But that presents a challenge because the mother's blood, by the time it reaches the placenta, has a lower oxygen saturation than her own tissues.
So how does the fetus get enough oxygen? Does fetal hemoglobin have some kind of special power?
You bet it does. Fetal hemoglobin has a higher affinity for oxygen than adult hemoglobin. This means it can grab onto oxygen even when there's not much of it around. It's a crucial adaptation for survival in the womb.
That's just amazing. You know, it's easy to forget how much is going on inside our bodies all the time, like how much work our circulatory system is doing every second of every day.
Yeah, it really is an incredible system. And honestly, before we started this deep dive, I don't think I fully realized how much I'd taken it for granted.
Me too.
Yeah.
Like, I knew it was important, obviously, but I didn't realize how complex and, well, just plain cool it is.
It's one of those things that we never really have to think about, right? Our heart just beats, our blood just flows. It all seems so simple.
Right. But when you really break it down like we have today, it's mind-blowing. All the different parts working together, the timing, the efficiency, it's just incredible.
Absolutely. And the more you learn about it, the more you realize just how elegant and well-designed it all is.
So as we wrap up our little biology lesson here, what's the main thing you want me to remember about the circulatory system?
I think the most important takeaway is that it's truly the lifeline of your body. It connects everything, delivering vital supplies and removing waste. So taking care of your heart and blood vessels, well, that's one of the best things you can do for your overall health.
That's a great point. Easy to forget sometimes that all these amazing processes are happening inside us, and we need to do our part to support them.
Absolutely. And there's always more to learn, you know. We could talk about the impact of different blood types or the challenges of heart disease or the amazing medical technologies being developed to treat those problems.
My mind is officially blown. This deep dive has been incredible. Really makes you appreciate the marvel that is the circulatory system. The heart, the blood vessels, hemoglobin, all of it working together. It's just fantastic.
It really is. So next time you feel your pulse or just feel your blood flowing, take a moment to appreciate this amazing system that keeps you going. It's pretty remarkable when you think about it.
Absolutely. Well, that's about all the time we have for today. Huge thanks to you for this incredible deep dive into the circulatory system. It's been a real eye-opener.
Glad you enjoyed.